president and moved to the White House, I have stopped earning my own money. How many children do you have? One daughter. Would you like to have more children? Yes, I would like to have one or two more children, but we are quite happy with our daughter, Chelsea. The women from Mashahadi looked at each other and murmured, poor Hillary. She has no cow, no income of her own. She has only one daughter. In the eyes of the Mashahadi women, Hillary Clinton was not empowered. They felt sorry for her. So, Maria and Veronica, and I'm just going to call them the authors of this book, Maria and Veronica, because that's what women in feminist community with each other do a lot. We call each other by first names. And Veronica's last name is really long. It's Benholt Thompson. And so it's going to be easier for me to say Maria and Veronica. So anyway, I have a quote here from Maria and Veronica about this episode with Hillary Clinton and village women in Bangladesh. They say, perhaps Ms. Clinton even realized, possibly for the first time, that something was lacking in her life. That in spite of all the wealth accumulated in her country, she was missing something essential. Something the Mashahadi women obviously still had. Was it their pride, their dignity, their self-assertion, their capacity to live by their own strength? Whatever we may call this something, we know that it comes from a subsistence perspective which enables people to produce and reproduce their own life, to stand on their own 2 feet, and to speak in their own voice. So, in their book, well, I'll just read a little bit more from Maria and Veronica. They say, in this book, we adopt the subsistence perspective too. We, like Hillary Clinton, live in a rich country, but we do not accept this model of wealth anymore. We do not accept it not only because it cannot be generalized to the rest of the world, but more because of the destruction the pursuance of the concept of the good life leaves behind. Destruction of nature, of foreign peoples, of people's self-reliance and dignity, of children's future, of anything we call humanity. We know that the perspective from above, aiming at permanent growth of goods, services, and money, cannot lead us out of the impasses this system has created. A radical break with the dominant paradigm and the search for a new perspective, a new vision are necessary. So what Maria and Veronica are saying, that they, like the village women, reject the way of life of the wealthy world, even though they're part of it, because that way of life can be lived by only a few people. It cannot be generalized to the rest of the world without destroying the planet totally, instantly. Because the way of life of the people in the wealthy industrialized world destroys nature and people in the poor part of the world. And lastly, that it destroys the self-reliance and humanity of the people who are in the rich world. This has major implications for those of us sitting here in this room because we are part of that rich world. So, the perspective from above, from the people in the rich world, cannot easily or cannot find solutions. And Maria and Veronica are looking to the Bangladeshi women for solutions. And they talk about 5 lessons that they learned from the Bangladeshi women. And the first one, we've kind of been talking about already, is to take the view from below. Instead of taking the view of the rich people, take the view of the poor people, and especially poor women. And she says poor rural women and urban women in the global south. And to start with everyday life and its politics, the strategies that women use to keep life going. So that's the perspective they suggest taking. The first lesson from Bangladeshi women. The second lesson is that what is necessary for people is not money, education, status, or prestige. What is necessary is control over the means of subsistence, and that includes some independent money income. Okay, that's very important, this point, control over the means of subsistence, because we don't have that here. And we'll be talking more about that shortly. The third lesson is awareness of the capacity to subsist independently provides pride, dignity, and courage. That's what gave the village women in Bangladesh the guts to think that Hillary Clinton was, they could pity Hillary Clinton because they felt so good and had about their own way of life and had such courage and dignity. The fourth lesson is that the ruling classes are not a desirable model. That what is good for the village women of Bangladesh is good for all of society. And the last lesson was to stop dividing the world into first and third worlds. To think about the world as as one thing and all the peoples of the world, and that if something is good for the people in the global south, it's good for the people in the global north. The subsistence perspective is good for everyone. So, the Bangladeshi women had reasons to understand these things. They had been through the Green Revolution, which was imposed on the people of Bangladesh, where pesticides and fertilizers and hybrid seeds and monoculture seeds were imposed on them. The results of that they experienced were the loss of soil fertility, the loss of the value of women in the society because women's work in the processing the crops was eliminated with the Green Revolution. The women no longer worked on seed preservation because the Western forces were providing the seeds. They were no longer germinating the young plants, rice plants, and they were no longer doing the post-harvest work. And the agrarian economy declined as a result of this, and guess what happened? Male violence against those women skyrocketed because the women were no longer as essential as they had been in producing the daily life of the people. And eventually some of the women in Bangladesh began a movement for food security and a happy life where they completely rejected the pesticides, they rejected the fertilizers, they rejected the plastic seeds, and they organized against the poisons that were in their own bodies. And this is after some of those women had been killing themselves with pesticides because their situation was so bad. So the women in Bangladesh really knew a lot about the Western world. They knew what it was doing to them. Okay. So a term that they talk about a little bit in the subsistence perspective and that Maria Mize has talked about a lot in other books of hers that I'm familiar with is the idea of catching up development. And this is the kind of development that the Western world has been forcing on the global South. They force the idea that everybody in the world can become developed and become industrialized. And that everybody in the developing world will eventually share the lifestyle of the people in the industrialized world. So the Bangladeshi women are very smart. They know that this is not going to happen. And those of us sitting in this room are probably smart too, and we probably know that it's not going to happen either. I mean, if everybody in the world lived like the people in the US lived, we'd be needing 4 planet Earths to support that. So not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. If it's not going to happen, then that's a really important piece of information that we all need to have. What we're doing by living the way that we're living here is not really very fair for most of the people in the world. Okay. So some of you may remember in the 80s, Margaret Thatcher, after the Berlin Wall fell, declaring that there is no alternative to the capitalist economy, that really the capitalist market economy is the only possibility, because the communists no longer had power, so capitalism obviously was the way to go. And a lot of people kind of believe that. But the slogan that Maria and Veronica use in their book is that subsistence is the alternative. And in here we have discussed, a couple of months ago, we discussed an eco-socialist book, which had some really interesting ideas in it and some good analyses of capitalism. But Maria and Veronica would not be for eco-socialism. They're much more interested in a decentralized view. And I really don't want to take questions right now, but, and maybe you missed, we're going to have some discussion along the way. I want to chug along here for a bit.
No problem.
I'm a nervous presenter, and so I kind of want to do a chunk of it and then break and do another chunk. You'll just have to bear with me.
That's fine.
Okay, now, a subsistence economy is probably sounding scary, and we're going to talk more about that some. But I just want to point out right now, before we go any further, that you already live in a subsistence economy. There's no society in the whole world that doesn't have a subsistence economy because they would be dead. Subsistence is our human base. It is the way that we humans live. It's how we reproduce. You know, when women become pregnant and give birth and nurse their children, and when men and women work to raise children, this is all the actions of subsistence. No corporation is paying women to get pregnant and have those babies. Nobody's paying households to raise children. It just doesn't happen. That's subsistence. When we have gardens and grow our own food, we're participating in the subsistence economy. When we clean our houses, we're doing subsistence work. We may use some technology to do it, but we're still the ones doing the work, and that's what it is subsistence. Cooking, mowing the lawn, all of those kinds of things. So I've seen estimates that say that 50% of the work that gets done in the industrialized world is coming from the subsistence economy. And other people have different names for the subsistence economy, and they have names that are probably nicer and easier for a lot of people in the industrial world to deal with. I've heard people call it the love economy or the gift economy or the core economy. And the core economy really comes kind of close to it because it is the core economy. It's the base of human society. Okay. So now I do want to break for a little bit of the discussion. I have a handout here that has some discussion questions on it, and I'll pass that around. And I'd like us to talk for a little bit about the first discussion question. They're all multiple discussion questions. I can't help it. I couldn't come up with one, so I'll read them while those are going around. So, and I really want you to stick very closely to this topic. A lot of times in here we have gone off on tangents